War is hell. That's what they say. But for some soldiers, the real terror doesn't come from enemy bullets or explosions. It comes from encounters that have no explanation. Encounters that shouldn't be possible. Encounters that make trained warriors question everything they thought they knew about reality. Tonight, I'm archiving 3 incidents that happened during wartime. Incidents that were reported by multiple soldiers. Incidents that were documented but never explained. These aren't stories about the horrors of combat. These are stories about something else entirely. Something that exists in the spaces between life and death. These are real accounts from real soldiers. And after you hear them, you'll understand why some veterans don't talk about what they really saw during their deployment. Let's begin. Story 1. The Russian Ghost. This story was submitted by someone I'll call Sergeant Davis. He served in the US Army and was deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. His unit was stationed at a remote outpost in the Baghlan province, in a mountainous region that had seen heavy fighting for decades. The area was historically significant. Soviet forces had occupied it during their war in Afghanistan in the 1980s. There had been brutal combat there. A lot of soldiers had died on that ground, both Russian and Afghan. The outpost Davis was stationed at was built on what the locals called Russian Hill. It was called that because there was a Soviet-era bunker at the top, a bunker that had been abandoned for over 20 years. Davis said his unit had been there for about 3 weeks when the incident started. It began with the night watch. Soldiers on guard duty started reporting that they were seeing someone moving on the hill, always at night, always around the same time, between 2 and 4 a.m. The first soldier to report it was a specialist named Martinez. He was on watch one night, scanning the perimeter with night vision goggles, when he saw a figure walking up the hill toward the abandoned bunker. Martinez called it in. He described the figure as a man moving slowly but deliberately up the slope. The man appeared to be carrying a rifle. Martinez radioed for permission to engage. He was told to hold fire and observe. The rules of engagement required positive identification of hostile intent before shooting. Martinez watched the figure through his night vision. The man kept walking, getting closer to the bunker. Martinez said something felt wrong about the way the man moved. Too slow, too methodical, like he was walking a route he'd walked 1,000 times before. When the figure was about 50 meters from the bunker, Martinez switched to his thermal scope. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures. Living bodies show up bright white or yellow against the cooler background. But when Martinez looked through the thermal scope, there was nothing there. No heat signature, no person, just empty hillside. He switched back to night vision. The figure was still there, still walking. Martinez was confused. He radioed his sergeant and explained what he was seeing, or what he wasn't seeing. The sergeant told him to keep watching. The figure reached the bunker and walked inside. Martinez waited, expecting the man to come back out. He never did. At first light, a patrol was sent to check the bunker. They found nothing. No footprints, no shell casings, no evidence anyone had been there. Martinez was convinced he'd seen something. But without any evidence, there wasn't much anyone could do. Some of the other guys gave him crap about it, said he was seeing things, told him to get more sleep. But then it happened again, 3 nights later. Different soldier on watch, same report. A man walking up the hill toward the bunker, visible on night vision, but not on thermal. This time, the sergeant himself went out the next morning to check. Again, nothing. No tracks. No signs of any person. The reports kept coming. Over the next 2 months, soldiers on night watch reported seeing the figure at least a dozen times. Always the same, a man walking up the hill. Always between 2 and 4 a.m. Always disappearing when viewed through thermal imaging. Then one night, Sergeant Davis saw it himself. He was on watch with another soldier, a corporal named Hayes. It was around 3 a.m. Davis was scanning the perimeter when he saw the figure, exactly as the others had described. A man walking slowly up the hill. Davis immediately switched to thermal. Nothing. He told Hayes to look through night vision. Hayes confirmed he could see the figure too. They watched as the man walked up the hill. Davis said he got a better look this time because the figure passed closer to their position. He could see that the man was wearing a uniform, but it wasn't an American uniform. It wasn't even a modern Afghan uniform. It looked like a Soviet-era uniform, the kind Russian soldiers wore in the 1980s. Davis felt his blood run cold. He knew the history of this area. He knew Russian soldiers had fought and died here. The figure continued walking, apparently unaware of Davis and Hayes watching him. As he got closer to the bunker, Davis made a decision. He called out in English, "Stop! Identify yourself!" The figure didn't stop, didn't react at all, just kept walking. Hayes suggested they fire a warning shot. Davis agreed. Hayes fired a single round into the dirt about 20 feet in front of the figure. The figure finally stopped, turned slowly to face them. Davis said what he saw next made him question his own sanity. Through the night vision, he could see the man's face clearly. The man was young, maybe early 20s, pale, with an expression that Davis described as empty. Not scared, not angry, just nothing. The man stared at them for about 10 seconds. Then he turned back toward the bunker and continued walking. Davis switched to thermal again, still nothing. He switched back to night vision. The figure was almost at the bunker now. Then Hayes said something that made Davis's skin crawl. "Sarge, I can see through him." Davis looked more carefully. Hayes was right. The figure was becoming translucent. You could see the rocks of the hillside through his body. They watched as the figure walked into the bunker and disappeared completely. Davis and Hayes didn't speak for several minutes. Finally, Hayes asked what they should do. Davis told him they were going to check it out. Right now. He wasn't waiting until morning this time. They grabbed another soldier, armed themselves, and headed up the hill with flashlights. It took them about 15 minutes to reach the bunker. The bunker was a concrete structure, partially collapsed on one side. They searched it thoroughly. Nothing. Empty. But then Davis found something. In the back corner of the bunker, partially buried in dirt and debris, was a piece of equipment, Russian military equipment, a radio, old and corroded, the kind Soviet soldiers would have used in the 1980s. Next to the radio was something else, a skeleton, human remains, still wearing the tattered remnants of a Soviet uniform. Davis immediately called it in. The next day, a full investigation team came out. They excavated the bunker and found the complete skeleton of a Soviet soldier. Based on the uniform and equipment, they estimated he'd been dead for at least 25 years. The forensic team determined the soldier had been wounded and had crawled into the bunker, probably trying to call for help with his radio. He'd died there, alone, waiting for rescue that never came. After they removed the remains, the sighting stopped. No more reports of the figure walking up the hill. No more ghostly Russian soldier. But Davis said he still thinks about it. about that young soldier who died alone in that bunker, so far from home, about how he was apparently walking that same path every night for 25 years, trying to get back to his post, trying to complete his mission. Davis was never the same after that deployment. He left the army 3 years later. He said he couldn't shake the feeling that war creates wounds that go deeper than anyone understands, that some soldiers never really leave the battlefield, even after death, and sometimes the living can see them, walking their eternal patrol, forever trying to get home. Story 2. The Invisible Man. This incident comes from a Marine I'll call Corporal Williams. He was deployed to Iraq in 2007 during the surge. His unit was conducting counter-IED operations in a particularly dangerous area west of Baghdad. Insurgents had been planting improvised explosive devices at a specific intersection almost every night. Multiple American vehicles had been hit there. Several Marines had been killed. Williams's unit was tasked with stopping the attacks. They set up what's called a small kill team, or SKT. Basically, a few Marines would take over a building overlooking the intersection and wait. When someone showed up to plant an IED, they'd eliminate them. It was a routine operation. Williams had done it before. His team consisted of 4 Marines, including a designated sniper. They moved into position just after dark, taking over an abandoned house that gave them a clear view of the intersection. The plan was simple. Watch the intersection through night vision and thermal scopes. When someone shows up with an IED, positively identify them as hostile, then take the shot. Standard rules of engagement. The night was quiet for the first few hours. Around 4 a.m., just before dawn, they spotted movement. A man walking alone down the street toward the intersection. He was carrying something large and cylindrical. Through their scopes, they could clearly identify it as an artillery round, the exact type that had been used in previous IED attacks at this location. Williams, as the team leader, made the call. Positive ID on a hostile threat. He gave the order. His sniper, a lance corporal named Rodriguez, had a clear shot, about 175 meters. Easy range for an M110 sniper rifle. Rodriguez took the shot. Williams saw the man drop through his binoculars. Clean hit. Center mass. The man fell to the ground and didn't move. Standard procedure was to wait. Make sure no one else showed up. Watch for any response. Then, at first light, they'd call in the quick reaction force to secure the area and collect the body and the unexploded ordnance. They waited for about 30 minutes. No movement. No response from any insurgents. The man Williams had seen get shot was still lying in the street where he'd fallen. As the sun started to come up, Williams radioed for the QRF. They arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 Humvees, 8 Marines. They set up security and approached the intersection. Williams and his team packed up their equipment and prepared to link up with the QRF. But then the radio crackled, the QRF squad leader's voice. We've got a problem. There's nothing here." Williams thought he'd misheard. He asked for clarification. The squad leader repeated. There was no body, no artillery round, nothing. Williams and his team immediately moved to the intersection. They spent the next 20 minutes searching. They walked in expanding circles from where the man had fallen. They looked for blood, drag marks, shell casings, anything. Nothing. It was like the man had never been there. Rodriguez was adamant. He'd made the shot. He'd seen the man drop. Williams had seen it too through his binoculars. All 4 Marines on the team had witnessed it. But there was no physical evidence. No body, no blood, No IED, nothing. Williams had to report it over the battalion net. He reported they'd engaged and killed an enemy combatant attempting to emplace an IED, but were unable to locate the body. It sounded ridiculous. He knew it sounded ridiculous. They caught endless amounts of criticism for it. Other units joked about Williams' team killing ghosts. Some people suggested they'd missed the shot and just didn't want to admit it. But Rodriguez was one of the best shots in the battalion, and all 4 Marines had seen the man fall. The incident was written off as a case of mistaken observation. Maybe they'd seen something else. Maybe the dawn light had played tricks on them. The official report basically implied they'd imagined it. Williams tried to move on, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong about that night. Then about 2 years later, Williams was at a bar back in the States. He ran into another Marine, someone who'd served in the same area of Iraq, but with a different battalion. They got to talking, trading deployment stories. Williams mentioned the intersection where his unit had operated. The other Marine's expression changed. He said, "Did you ever see the Invisible Man?" Williams felt his blood run cold. He asked what the other Marine meant. The Marine told a story. His unit had also conducted SKT operations in that same area. They'd also engaged an insurgent at that intersection. Clean shot, confirmed kill. But when they went to collect the body, it wasn't there. Nothing there. Just like Williams's experience. The Marine said it had happened to another team in his battalion too. Same intersection, same result. They'd shot someone, watched them fall, then found nothing. Williams asked if the Marine knew anything else about it. The Marine shrugged and said there were rumors. Locals in the area talked about a jinn, a type of supernatural creature from Islamic mythology. They said a jinn lived at that intersection, that it would appear as a man, trick soldiers into shooting at it, then vanish. Some locals believed the jinn fed on violence and death, that it was drawn to the intersection because so many people had been killed there. Williams didn't believe in jinn or any supernatural explanation, but he also couldn't explain what he'd witnessed, what multiple teams of Marines had witnessed. The most disturbing part came years later. Williams was researching online, trying to find any information about similar incidents. He found a military forum where veterans shared stories. There was an entire thread dedicated to unexplained combat incidents. Someone had posted about the exact same intersection. But the post was from 2004, 3 years before Williams's deployment. A soldier from an army unit had reported shooting an insurgent at that intersection, only to find nothing when they checked. Williams kept searching. He found 4 more accounts, all different units, different years, spanning from 2004 to 2009, all reporting the same thing: engaging a combatant at or near that intersection in West Baghdad, watching them fall, then finding no evidence they'd ever been there. Williams contacted 2 of the people who'd posted. Both confirmed their stories. Both said they'd gotten in trouble for reporting it. Both said they'd been accused of missing their shots or fabricating the incident. But Williams knew they weren't lying, because he'd seen it himself. To this day, Williams has no explanation. He doesn't know if it was a jinn, a ghost, or something else entirely. He just knows that something was happening at that intersection, something that multiple trained soldiers witnessed over a period of years. And whatever it was, it's probably still there, still appearing to soldiers on night watch, still vanishing when approached, still feeding on the violence and death that war brings. Williams doesn't talk about it much. People don't believe him, but he knows what he saw. And he knows he's not the only one. Story 3. The Tunnel Voices. The final story comes from a Vietnam veteran I'll call Lieutenant Mitchell. He served in 1969 and 1970, during some of the heaviest fighting of the war. Mitchell was assigned to a special unit that dealt with the Viet Cong tunnel systems. The VC had dug thousands of miles of tunnels throughout South Vietnam. They used them for storage, hospitals, living quarters, and to move troops undetected. The tunnels were nightmares. Dark, cramped, often booby-trapped. Some American soldiers specialized in going into these tunnels to clear them. They were called tunnel rats. Mitchell wasn't officially a tunnel rat, but his unit frequently had to enter and clear tunnel complexes. The incident Mitchell told me about happened in the Cu Chi district, about 30 miles from Saigon. His platoon had been operating in the area for about 2 weeks when they discovered a large tunnel entrance hidden in the jungle. Standard procedure was to call in engineers who would blow the tunnel or pump it full of CS gas to flush out anyone hiding inside. But Mitchell's commanding officer wanted intelligence. He wanted to know what was in that tunnel before they destroyed it. Maps, documents, weapons caches, anything that could provide tactical information. Mitchell was ordered to take a 4-man team into the tunnel. They'd go in, do a quick reconnaissance, and report back. Mitchell chose 3 soldiers he trusted. They prepared their equipment: flashlights, sidearms, grenades. You couldn't use a rifle in the tunnels. Too long, too unwieldy. It was pistols and knives only. They entered the tunnel around 2 p.m. The entrance was just a hole in the ground, barely wide enough for a man to fit through. Mitchell went first, lowering himself down on a rope. The tunnel was about 6 feet deep at the entrance. Then it leveled out into a horizontal passage. The passage was maybe 3 feet high. You had to crawl on your hands and knees. Mitchell moved forward with his flashlight, the other 3 soldiers following behind him. The tunnel was hot, humid, and smelled like earth and decay. It was the kind of place that made you feel like you were being buried alive. They'd been crawling for about 10 minutes when Mitchell heard something. Voices, speaking in Vietnamese. He stopped immediately and signaled the others to halt. They all listened. The voices were faint, but clear. Multiple people having a conversation somewhere ahead in the tunnel. Mitchell whispered to his team that there were VC in the tunnel. They needed to back out carefully and call in an airstrike or artillery to collapse it. But then one of his soldiers, a private named Kowalski, said something that made Mitchell freeze. "Sir, those voices are speaking in French." Mitchell listened more carefully. Kowalski was right. It wasn't Vietnamese, it was French. That didn't make sense. The French had left Vietnam in 1954, 15 years earlier. Why would there be French speakers in a Viet Cong tunnel? Mitchell decided to move forward cautiously to get a better listen. He crawled ahead another 20 feet. The voices got louder. They were definitely speaking French. Mitchell didn't speak French, but he could recognize the language. And there was something else. The voices sounded off, distorted somehow, like they were coming through a bad radio. Mitchell reached a junction where the tunnel split into 2 passages. The voices seemed to be coming from the left passage. He signaled his team to stay back and crawled into the left tunnel alone. About 15 feet down, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. Mitchell shined his flashlight inside. The chamber was empty. No people, no equipment, nothing. But the voices were louder now. They seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. Mitchell felt panic rising. This wasn't right. He backed out of the chamber and returned to his team. He told them they were leaving. Now. They started crawling back toward the entrance, but as they moved, the voices followed them. They seemed to be all around now, coming from every direction, and they were getting louder. Then the voices changed. They weren't speaking French anymore. They were screaming. Horrible, agonized screaming. The sound of people in terrible pain. Mitchell and his team scrambled toward the exit as fast as they could crawl. The screaming got louder and louder until it was deafening. Mitchell felt like his eardrums were going to burst. They reached the entrance and pulled themselves out one by one. Mitchell was the last one out. As he emerged into daylight, the screaming stopped abruptly. Complete silence. Mitchell's team was pale and shaking. One of them had tears running down his face. They all heard it. The voices, the screaming, all of it. Mitchell reported to his commanding officer that the tunnel appeared to be abandoned, but advised against entering it. He didn't mention the voices. He knew he'd sound insane. But that night, Kowalski came to Mitchell and told him something. Kowalski said he'd asked around with some of the older locals who worked with the American forces. He'd described the tunnel location and asked if they knew anything about it. One of the interpreters said that the area had historical significance. During the First Indochina War in the 1950s, when the French were fighting the Viet Minh, there had been a battle there. French soldiers had been trapped in a tunnel complex by Viet Minh forces. The Viet Minh had sealed the tunnels and then pumped gas into them. 87 French soldiers died in those tunnels, died slowly in agony as the gas filled the confined space. Some had shot themselves rather than die from the gas. Their bodies weren't recovered until weeks later when the area was retaken. Mitchell felt sick. The tunnels his team had entered were likely part of that same complex. The voices they'd heard, the screaming, it was the French soldiers. Somehow, their final moments had been trapped in those tunnels. Mitchell refused to enter any more tunnels after that. He cited safety concerns, and his CO didn't push it. But Mitchell knew the real reason. He couldn't go back down there. Couldn't face those voices again. Years later, Mitchell did some research. He found historical records of the battle Kowalski had mentioned. The death toll was confirmed. 87 French soldiers died in the tunnels at Cu Chi in 1952. Mitchell also found something else. Records of other American soldiers who'd entered tunnels in that area and reported hearing voices, hearing screaming. Many of them refused to talk about it in detail. But the reports were there, scattered through various unit logs and after-action reports. The tunnels were eventually destroyed. The whole area was bombed heavily. But Mitchell wonders if destruction can truly end what happened there. If the voices might still be there, trapped in whatever's left of those passages underground. He said he still has nightmares, not about combat, not about the things he saw above ground during the war, but about those tunnels, about the voices, about the terrible screaming of men who died in the dark, far from home, 50 years ago, but somehow still suffering. Mitchell is in his 70s now. He rarely talks about Vietnam, but he wanted me to know about this. He wanted someone to document it, because he says those French soldiers deserve to be remembered, even if they're no longer at peace, even if they're still down there, still screaming in the dark. 3 war stories, 3 incidents that have no rational explanation. Sergeant Davis and the Russian ghost in Afghanistan, a soldier who died alone 25 years ago, but was still walking his patrol every night, trying to complete his mission. Corporal Williams and the Invisible Man in Iraq. Something that appeared at an intersection of death, drawing fire from multiple units over years, then vanishing without a trace. And Lieutenant Mitchell and the tunnel voices in Vietnam. The screams of French soldiers who died in agony decades before, somehow still echoing through the darkness. These stories disturb me more than most I archive, because they all share a common thread. They suggest that war creates wounds, not just in the living, but in reality itself. That extreme violence and death can leave scars that persist long after the battles are over. These soldiers witnessed things they couldn't explain, things that shouldn't be possible, and they had to carry that knowledge with them for the rest of their lives, knowing that most people wouldn't believe them. But I believe them. I've spoken to too many veterans who've reported similar experiences, who've seen things in war zones that can't be rationalized, who know that some battles never truly end. If you're a veteran and you've experienced something like this, you're not alone, you're not crazy, and your story matters. These incidents remain in our archives as unexplained, as evidence that war creates horrors we're only beginning to understand. Stay vigilant, and remember, the most dangerous enemies aren't always the ones you can see. This is Dusky Incident Archives. These cases remain open. Before you go, if these war stories disturbed you, please subscribe to Dusky Incident Archives. I archive new cases every week, including more military encounters that can't be explained. If this video gave you chills, hit that like button. It helps me continue documenting these incidents and giving voice to the soldiers who witnessed them. Drop a comment. Which story affected you the most? The Russian ghost, the invisible man, or the tunnel voices? If you're a veteran with your own unexplained encounter, I want to hear from you. Send your incident to the email in the description. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that war has aspects we don't talk about. Aspects that go beyond the physical battlefield. And to all the veterans watching this, thank you for your service. And thank you for trusting me with your stories. The world needs to know what you've experienced. Thank you for watching Dusky Incident Archives. Stay safe out there. And remember, some soldiers never really leave the battlefield, even in death.